intertwined nature of independence and cooperation. Thirdly, a commitment to peace and to security. And fourthly, the courage to stay on a steady course. So let us now look at things in order. Firstly, the importance of fundamental norms and values. International public law is crucial. It is particularly crucial the smaller a country is. We cannot tolerate the power of the strongest prevailing over the rights of the weakest. This is why Switzerland is committed to ensure the respect of international public law, that includes international humanitarian law and also human rights. This is also why Switzerland is committed to combating impunity. We must all ensure that serious breaches of international law be condemned. The perpetrators must be held account for their acts. For example, in the context of the mass grave in Izum. In this context, the values are the compass guiding our actions, so standing in solidarity with the international community and promoting sustainable development for us are fundamentally important. To this end, our shared roadmap is the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This should help our societies become more resilient, more sustainable, and more inclusive in the future. Some global circumstances have significantly slowed down the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. Nonetheless, Switzerland is proud to have presented this year its second national report on the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. This report notes our progress made, even if additional efforts should be made to achieve all of the goals. I would therefore, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, urge you to take another look at the fundamental values of the 2030 Agenda and step up efforts to work together to ensure it be implemented. The second point was the intertwined nature of independence and cooperation. So they're not antinomes. Pursuant to the United Nations Charter, each country is sovereign and therefore it's independent. Like all countries do, Switzerland values its independence. It enables us to pay diversity of our culture and our population, to pay it the attention that it deserves. Switzerland has 4 national languages and has great cultural diversity. It is made up of 26 distinct cantons, all active politically, and this was before the federal state. Given this, we've learned that cooperation, mutual respect, and dialogue, and this is ongoing, permanent dialogue, these are the only ways to tackle difficulties. Independence and cooperation. Independence and cooperation in reality are 2 extremely closely linked concepts. Without cooperation, independence would be synonymous with isolation. Without independence, cooperation would be a constraint. An open dialogue from equal to equal, between equal and equal, a climate of trust and collaboration are of crucial importance for international cooperation. Thanks to International Geneva, Switzerland contributes to this dialogue. Geneva is the centre of multilateral diplomacy for matters pertaining to global governance, to peace, to human rights, to disarmament, to the environment and to healthcare, but also, and this is new, for anticipating technological challenges. For each and every one of us, the UN is a unique universal platform for dialogue and for cooperation. We need to make the very most of this. My third point, a commitment to peace and security. Switzerland is a neutral country. Ladies and gentlemen, this means that we strictly respect the right to neutrality enshrined in international public law. We do not get involved in conflicts, and we provide no military support to any party to a conflict. Nothing, ladies and gentlemen, nothing can change this or bring it into question. However, neutrality does not mean indifference. Neutrality does not mean an absence of solidarity. We undertake to protect the principles of freedom, of democracy, and of the rule of law, values that are also embedded in our Swiss constitution. Switzerland was elected to the Security Council of the United Nations here in this hall on the 9th of June with 187 votes. We thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for the strong mandate that you have given us and for the trust that you have placed in us. By proposing our candidacy, Switzerland has shown that it is ready to shoulder its responsibilities to protect peace and security in the world. We will work unremittingly to live up to the trust that you have placed in us and to embody our slogan, A+ for peace. From this standpoint, we have established 4 priorities. 1, promote a lasting peace. We want to make available our long-standing experience in the area of promoting peace and conflict prevention. In this context, we particularly wish to focus on women's participation in the peace process. 2, protect civilians. They pay the highest price in conflicts. We commit to protect civilians, to ensure the respect for international humanitarian law and human rights. 3, strengthen the effectiveness of the Security Council. For a long time now, we have advocated for greater effectiveness of this crucial UN body and for greater transparency in its work and for the involvement of all stakeholders. We will continue to pursue this as part of our term. The 4th point is acting for climate security. Climate change, one of the greatest challenges we face, also threatens peace and security. This is why we will rally to ensure this issue also be addressed within the Security Council. Ladies and gentlemen, it goes without saying that our commitment to a more peaceful world is not just limited to the Security Council. This is why Switzerland, along with its Ukrainian partners, hosted the Conference on the Reconstruction of Ukraine in the Tessin canton, from whence I hail. The Lugano principles that stemmed from that establish broadly accepted criteria for reconstruction and reform in Ukraine. I would like to take this opportunity to commend the involvement of our partners, Great Britain and Germany, in pursuing this process, the first in 2023 and then Germany in 2024. If the parties involved so wish, Switzerland always stands ready to share its long and vast experience of good offices. My 4th point is the courage to stay on a steady course. Ladies and gentlemen, we are facing complex challenges. Nonetheless, our resources are limited. It is therefore crucial to prioritize our action. What does that mean for multilateralism? That means that we need to focus on the critical issue of the peaceful and lasting coexistence of the peoples. That means that we need a strong, effective UN, and it can only be effective if it is focused. That means a clear and better distribution of tasks and a better coordination of the UN organizations. Then it will make it possible to tap into all existing synergies. That also means that we need to make better use of science. I very much liked the fact that the President of the Assembly has focused on the collaboration with science in his statement this morning. We call this scientific diplomacy. The exciting developments provided here pave the way to new approaches and progress which is likely to achieve tangible results. The Swiss government, with the Geneva Canton, is proud along these lines to have created the GESDA Foundation, the Geneva Science and Diplomacy Anticipator Foundation. The aim of GESDA is to anticipate the challenges posed by new technologies, to maximize the benefits from them and to minimize the risks for people, and also to guarantee a sustainable future for our planet. Or, if I can put it another way, the targeted strengthening of multilateralism and the refocusing on key issues, these are precisely these instruments that will enable us together to find a solution to this difficult period that we're in and will guide us towards a better future. The UN provides a unique framework, the only framework currently globally to fulfill and uphold the resolve expressed in the preamble of its charter, namely, unite our strength to maintain international peace and security. That is the focus, as partners and not as adversaries. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Swiss Confederation for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will hear an address by Her Excellency Zuzana Čaputová, President of the Slovak Republic. I request protocol to escort Her Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome Her Excellency Zuzana Čaputová, President of the Slovak Republic, and to invite her to address the Assembly.
Dear President of the General Assembly, dear Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. This organization has a clear purpose, as spelled out in Article 1 of the UN Charter: to maintain international peace and security, to develop friendly relations among nations, and to achieve international cooperation. Today, most of you would probably agree that we are still far from achieving this goal. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. Each and every member of the UN has a responsibility to protect peace. In this, the permanent members of the UN Security Council have a special duty. Instead, today, we see one of the 5 permanent members openly denying the right of another UN member, Ukraine, to exist as an independent state. Those who break the rules themselves have no authority to set rules for others through power of veto. The wrongs of Russia's aggression could not be clearer. 141 countries deplored Moscow's war against Ukraine in a General Assembly resolution. No veto at the Security Council can change the fundamental truth. The truth that today, rather than protecting global peace, Russia is doing everything to undo it. Moscow's aggression has inflicted harm on the entire world. Thousands of innocent Ukrainian civilians have been killed. Millions had to leave their homes, triggering one of the largest refugee crises in Europe's history. 50 million people are on the brink of starvation in Africa and Asia. Russia's blockage of Ukraine's ports and confiscation of its harvest has made that already grave global food crisis even worse. We welcome the deal mediated by the Secretary General Guterres and Turkey, and we call on Russia to fully unblock all Ukraine's ports. Otherwise, the world will continue to suffer. The democratic world and all of us must be a voice of Ukraine, the voice that won't be silent, one voice that will continue to testify about Russia's crime in Ukraine, the voice that will remember and that will act so no one is ever allowed to commit such atrocities again. Excellencies, Vladimir Putin hopes to conquer Ukraine and scare the rest of us. In this goal, he has failed, as Ukraine's recent successes on the battlefield demonstrate. We will rebuild peace. To do so, we must learn from our past mistakes. This is not the first time we have seen aggression in Europe. Russia has occupied parts of Georgia since 2008 and parts of Ukraine since 2014. Our response to these actions was incomplete. Concerns about our response to these actions and our comfort weakened our resolve. The tepid sanctions we imposed failed to discourage Russia from trying again. Our weakness encouraged more aggression. We must not repeat the same mistake again. The ignorance of rules is poisoning global security, and it must not be allowed to stand. More than 50 countries, including all members of the European Union, have already imposed tough sanctions on Russia. Slovakia is Ukraine's direct neighbor. Our own security is impacted by this war. We are neither the biggest nor the richest country in the world. We have long been dependent on Russia's energy supplies. But we chose the protection of our fundamental rights. We have imposed sanctions on Russia and are supporting Ukraine, including through military aid, because Ukraine's fight is just and defensive and in line with international law. I invite all of you to join. We should all help Ukraine politically, militarily, financially, because this is the only way how we can restore peace. Honorable members, the war in Ukraine is not the only crisis exposing the gap between the rules and commitments we agreed on and their practical realization. In November, we will have already the 27th COP summit in Egypt, but our actions remain dangerously behind our words. Our greenhouse gas emissions are not falling fast enough. How much more scorched earth? How many millions more climate refugees? How many flood victims does it take to convince us that ignoring our commitments is no longer an option? We are desperately behind in cutting our emissions. Worse, we hear voices that argue that climate crisis must wait because of increasing energy prices. This would be a grave mistake. Yes, the price increases are painful, and we must help those who risk losing access to energy. But we must not lose sight of the bigger picture. We are talking about the rising prices of commodities, which we must phase out anyway to stop the planet's warming. Rather than bring back subsidies for coal or gas, we must transition away from them. Renewable energy is less dependent on those who are trying to use gas or oil as an energy weapon. And it's cheaper. Despite the current energy crisis, Slovakia stops using coal as a source of energy next year. We are investing in renewables and launching a retrofitting program for buildings to boost energy efficiency, because the cheapest energy is the one you don't use. We can only do this together, globally, and in solidarity with each other. We need all big economies to join and help those who need it. At this year's COP27, we need a significant increase of funds for lower and middle-income countries. Many of them contribute very little to our planet's heating, but suffer the most from its consequences. Excellencies, as the world community, we have put short-term comfort over lasting solutions when it comes to two crises, that of international peace order and that of our climate. But there is a third crisis of relativization of values, facts, and expertise, as well as a decrease of trust in democratic institutions. We are facing an epidemic of lies, propaganda, and disinformation. It's hardly new, but thanks to the rise of social media, it is more powerful. If algorithms favor hatred over truth, or nonsense over science, if they appeal to our instincts rather than the greater good, what hope is there for global understanding? Or for the sort of cooperation that the UN has been created to advance? Democracies are tolerant by default, but they die if they start tolerating intolerance. Along with the rest of the European Union, Slovakia leads the way for an achieved and democratic regulation of major social platforms and online media. Online space should be guided by the same democratic rules that apply offline. We welcome UN initiatives for rules for state behavior in cyberspace. The efforts toward a so-called Digital Geneva Convention are justified and needed. The crises I mentioned have a disproportionate impact on women and girls. This plays out in higher rates of gender-based and domestic violence, greater economic insecurity and poverty, or worse access to education and healthcare. However, I am not here to portray women as victims. I am here to call on all of them to step up their engagement in public affairs. Women are agents of change. The world has a collective responsibility to support them, because we are already seeing the consequences of a world that is run without taking their unique and diverse experience into proper account. Ladies and gentlemen, time has not been very favorable to the ideas that build and sustain this organization. The peace we should safeguard is fraying. The international cooperation we should foster hasn't prevented a climate catastrophe. And the spirit of shared global commons that the UN embodies is under attack from extremists, their voice multiplied by new technologies. Half measures are not enough to cope with these challenges. We have tried that before. It's time for action and for clarity. We, the members of the UN, need to clearly side with victim over aggressor. We must choose international rules-based order over the power of gun. We must urgently deliver on our climate goals and find working rules for social media platforms to protect our societies and the international order. Sure, we can delay and compromise. But again, history teaches us that passivity and ignorance never solve crises. They only delay the moment of reckoning. And since obeying even the smallest of rules matters, let me finish here to respect the agreed time limit. Thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Slovak Republic for her statement, and I request protocol to escort her Excellency. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Emmanuel Macron, President of the French Republic. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome His Excellency Emmanuel Macron, President of the French Republic, and to invite him to address the Assembly.
Monsieur le Président de l'Assemblée,
Mr. President of the General Assembly, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state and government, ministers, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor for me to take the floor before this august assembly to bring France's voice, and I'm thinking right now about those who have fought in my country, but also throughout the world, for France to be free. Those people who thought that Europe's destiny could not be indifferent to them before. And those people who come from Africa, from Asia, from throughout the world, because through their freedom, that is what they have achieved. I'm thinking about those people who've written our charter and who've built the walls of this organization to stop the worst when that happened on 2 occasions in the 20th century that inflicted upon the whole of humanity immeasurable suffering. Let us not ever forget that debt. It serves the interests of all our people and shows us the path of peace. It reminds us that there is no other legitimate center of power that is lasting in nature than that the countries decide upon sovereignly together. It says that the universal nature of our organization is at the service of no hegemony, no geopolitical hierarchy. This legacy, our organization, like our choices as nations, are today, however, confronted with an alternative. Today, we need to make a simple choice, basically, that of war or that of peace. On the 24th of February this year, Russia, a permanent member of the Security Council, through an act of aggression, an invasion, an annexation, broke our collective security. It deliberately violated the UN Charter and the principle of sovereign equality of states. From the 16th of March, the International Court of Justice declared the Russian aggression as illegal, and it called for the withdrawal of Russia. Russia decided by doing so to pave the way for other wars of annexation in Europe today and perhaps tomorrow in Asia or in Africa or in Latin America. We can say anything we want today, and I hear a lot of discussions, a lot of stances are taken. There is one sure and certain thing. When I am talking to you now, there are Russian troops in Ukraine. And as far as I know, there are no Ukrainian troops in Russia. That is a statement of fact. And we all need to understand that. The longer it goes on, the worse and more threatening this war is for Europe and the world. It leads us to greater conflict, ongoing conflict, where the security and sovereignty of everyone no longer depends on a balance of strength, on the strength of alliances, but rather that of armed groups and militias. Those who consider themselves as strong seek to subject or subjugate all those who they consider as weak. Those who, what we've seen since the 24th of February is a return to the age of imperialism and colonies. France rejects this. France obstinately will look for peace. Our position is clear, and we want to serve this. And so that is why I am engaging in a dialogue with Russia and have done so since the start of the war and over these past months, and I will continue to head this up because it's only together that we will find peace. A quest for peace with initiatives taken over the months and years before the conflict, a quest for peace since the 24th of February by the humanitarian, military and political support that we're providing to the Ukrainian people so that they can enjoy their legitimate right to defense and preserve their sovereignty. The quest for peace by condemning the invasion of a sovereign compensate, and the violation of our collective security principles, war crimes committed by Russia in Ukraine, and by our refusal of impunity. International justice must establish the crimes and condemn and try the perpetrators. The quest for peace through our desire to curb geographic expansionism in war. And here we undertake to support the efforts of the IAEA to prevent the impact of war on safety and security of nuclear plants, as we'll do tomorrow beside the Ukrainians, whose sovereignty and safety is absolutely crucial. We have ensured that a IAEA mission went to Ukraine, establishing its independent report to prevent the risk of an accident whose consequences would be devastating. We are all aware today here that only an agreement that respects international law will enable peace to come back. A negotiation can only be possible if sovereignly Ukraine wants it and Russia accepts it in good faith. We are all aware as well that a negotiation will only be successful if Ukraine is liberated and its sovereignty is protected. Russia must now see that it cannot impose its will militarily, even if there are fake pretend referenda in territories that have been bombed and are now occupied. It is up to the members of the Security Council to say this loud and clear, and to the members of this assembly to support us on our path to peace. I, from this podium, call upon members of the United Nations to act so that Russia rejects the path of war and assesses the cost for itself and for all of us, and really brings an end to this act of aggression. We're not talking about choosing a camp here between the East and the West, either between the North or the South either. What we're talking about is everybody's responsibility, everybody who's committed to the respect of the Charter and our most common precious good, peace. Because over and beyond war, there's a risk of dividing the world that's at stake here with the direct and indirect impact of the conflict. I know that here many cherish a feeling of injustice because of economic, energy, and all the other dramatic consequences because of the war conducted by Russia. I know that there are countries here that have chosen a form of neutrality vis-a-vis this war. With very honestly today, who is saying clearly, those who are saying that they're not aligned, they are wrong. They are making a historic error. The combat of the non-aligned movement is a combat for peace. They fought for peace, for the sovereignty of states, for the territorial integrity of everybody. The fight for the non-aligned. Those who are keeping silent today actually are, in a way, complicit with the cause of a new imperialism, a new order that is trampling over the current order, and there's no peace possible here. Russia is today seeking to uphold a double standard, but the war in Ukraine must not be a conflict that leaves anyone indifferent. It is very close to the Europeans who chosen to support Ukraine without entering war with Russia. It is further off for many of you. Nonetheless, we all are suffering the direct impact of it, and we all have a role to play to bring an end to it, because we're all paying the price of it. By its very foundation, this war launched by Russia is undermining the principle of our organization, is undermining the only possible world order, is undermining peace, that which underpins peace, the respect for the intangibility of borders and sovereign nations. To this end, Let us not muddle up cause and effect. Who here can defend the idea that the invasion of Ukraine justifies no sanction? Who of you here can consider that the day when something similar with a more powerful neighbor happens to you, there'll be silence from the region, from the world? Who can say that's the best solution? Who can believe that Russia just has to win this war for us to move on to something else? Nobody can believe that. Contemporary imperialism is not Western, it's not European. It takes the form of a territorial invasion linked with a hybrid modernized war that uses energy prices, food insecurity, nuclear safety, access to information, and population movements as weapons for division and destruction. And it's there. That is how the war undermines all of our sovereignty. France is standing alongside the free peoples of the UN here to deal with the consequences of the conflict and all the inequalities by rejecting bloc mindsets or exclusive alliances, because over and beyond the direct impact of the war, the risk is ours today. It is that of a new partition of the world. Some people want to say that there's the West that defends outdated interests, and then there's the West of the world that has suffered so much and wants to cooperate by turning a blind eye. And I reject this division for at least two reasons. Firstly, in principle, and I've just mentioned this, our organization has universal values. Let us not be deaf to the fact that there is, or let's not say that there's anything regional or adaptable in the Charter. No, our organization has universal values, and the division vis-a-vis the war in Ukraine is simple. Are you in the favor of the law of the strongest, the non-respect for the territorial integrity of countries? Are you for or against impunity? I see no international order nor lasting peace that can be based on the respect of peoples and the principle of responsibility. I see no option apart from that. That is the only order. So our values are universal, and that's why we should never serve a power that violates these principles. Over recent years, when we have taken liberty with these values, we have been wrong. But this can in no way justify trampling on what we have built together after the Second World War. When I hear Russia say that it is ready to work in areas of new cooperation with a new international order with no hegemony, well, okay, well, based on what principle? The invasion of borders and non-respect of the borders of those people I don't particularly like. What is this order? Who's playing hegemony today? It is Russia. What are we talking about? What is being invented here today? This is nothing that's going to hold water. Let us not cede to the cynicism that rejects this order that we've built together. And it's the only thing that can hold in stability in our world. The respect for the for borders, for territorial integrity. We were wrong when we took liberties with all of this. After the Second World War, after colonialism, we built something else. We said, no, it's not, we're not having this, we're not accepting this. The second reason for my opposition for this attempt to split up, to have partition in the world, is pragmatic. There are nascent divisions, and over and beyond that, there are attempts to divide the world, to exacerbate any tensions between the United States and China. That is not going to be a new Cold War. There are lots of different powers that are trying to promote regional tensions and push back collective security and promote nuclear developments. I therefore think that we need to do everything that we can to ensure that this division does not occur, because what faces us, the challenges facing us, are more urgent and they require new forms of cooperation. Let us look at Pakistan. A third of the country is underwater. Over 1,000, many people have died and were injured. The Horn of Africa, the worst drought for 40 years, a rainy season which will undoubtedly be even worse. Half of humanity is living in an area of climate danger. Our ecosystems are reaching the point of no return. Let us look at Somalia, at Yemen, at South Sudan, at Afghanistan. Famine is coming back. The food crisis is striking everywhere, and it is affecting the most vulnerable people. Millions of children are facing famine. There are 100 million people displaced between 1999 and 2015. Only 130,000 people escape poverty, and so many people today are in conflict-affected countries. Given these crises, climate change, pandemics, the spike in food prices, the most vulnerable people are always the worst affected. Threats are always there, over and beyond all that. Terrorism that affects the Sahel and the Middle East, nuclear proliferation in Iran and in North Korea as well. We have not managed to curb this. These are the things we need to address urgently. And there were all these descriptions that I've just given you, and this list is not exhaustive. But each time when we have shortcomings in our international system, we need to curb these problems. And much of these problems are caused by divisions between us. Therefore, it is our shared responsibility, must be to help the most fragile, to help the most vulnerable to cope with these challenges. Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, was right when he said, the time is not for war. It is not for revenge against the West or for opposing the West against the East. It is the time for a collective time for our sovereign equal states to cope together with challenges we face. This is why there's an urgent need to develop a new contract between the North and the South, an effective contract which is respectful for food, for biodiversity, for education. It's no longer a time for bloc thinking, but to build a coalition of specific action to reconcile legitimate interests and common goods. Now on the global food crisis, France has doubled its contributions to the World Food Programme along with the EU. We have solidarity